Thank you for joining us. We want to take a little bit of your time, talk about what we're hearing from a variety of sources, industry experts, our customers, and while there's a lot of collateral out there, a lot of people want to talk about big picture and big ideas. We know that very much now, a lot of companies are in the weeds. There are real challenges right now, day to day, and we want to bring to your attention some mechanisms, some capabilities, some things that are already possibly enabled in your environments that you can take advantage of and hopefully streamline some things. So some of it will be a little bit more high level, but a lot of it's going to be here are some actionable things that pretty easily you can try out. So the big question, and I think everyone's mind, is whether or not this is the new normal. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's, in my lifetime, probably the biggest or the only truly global event of this nature. It's been many, many years since a truly global war or a truly global disaster. So this is something new, and it's disrupting us in untold and countless ways. Some are merely inconveniences, and some are much more serious than that. So both from a societal and economic standpoint, this is extremely disruptive, and sadly, I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. We have right now the quarantines and the stay-at-home orders that's disrupting supply chains, disrupting demand patterns. We're going to have other knockoff effects, such as people's behaviors is going to change, a lot more stress. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that everyone gained a few pounds after the next few months. It's going to be lots of different things going on. The duration and intensity of these are unclear. I think we're all doing our best to mitigate and minimize the intensity, but it's really unclear how long this is going to go and what the impact is going to be. And the not $1 million, the $1 trillion question really comes down to, are things going to return to what we know and have kind of grown to work inside, so constraint, or is the world going to be just inherently different after this is all said and done? So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things going on. In today's session, I want to touch on 8 primary areas. The first 4 are going to be focused around challenges you're probably experiencing right now, and some ideas and methods to deal with those challenges. 2, from a demand planning perspective, future challenges you're going to be seeing, and some food for thought on how to deal with those, and then just some additional considerations and some thoughts around next steps. So the first area is diminishing or expanding demands. What we've heard from a lot of our customers is they're seeing some of their channels, some of their retailers close down. So demand suddenly went from active and robust to 0 overnight. And there's a challenge of managing that. Other places you'll see just a reduction of the demand. For example, let's say you're selling moisturizer and sunscreen, and the retailer that carries it has been deemed essential. Well, it's just Target, so they're still open, but people are going outside a lot less. There's a lot less demand for sunscreen and moisturizer, so you're not 0, but you're substantially down. These closures and reductions vary dramatically across geographies and different accounts. Some accounts are essential, some accounts are being non-essential, and that's going to drive a lot of variation in demand. And for some items, most of our customers at least indicated for some of their products, they're actually seeing increases or sometimes exploding demand for specific items. If you're selling face masks, obviously demand is booming, but it might be even more subtle things. For example, if you're selling baking supplies and cake decorations, I know I've got the challenge. I've got a boy at home, and we need something to do all day. So part of that is we've been baking. So suddenly we're buying things that we don't buy day to day. We're buying more of. So some products we're seeing dramatic increases in, and that's going to be just the norm. So the big question is, how do you want to deal with this? So honestly, my recommendation is, and what people are saying is, focus on short and midterm forecasting. It's less a matter of let's forecast how we're going to do 15 months from now, 18 months from now, maybe even 9 months from now. Let's focus on what we can deal with right now to get through this period. So let's focus on forecasting the short term, but obviously within your lead times. Trying to adjust next month's forecast if all your supply is on a container ship that's going to arrive in 2 months, that doesn't help you any. But look at your kind of what your lead time is, especially now if your supply chain is going to get disrupted, and focus on what's in your immediate lead time, like it's right outside your lead times, what you can control there, and how you can try to manage your forecast. I hate saying this, but right now when you're kind of in just reaction mode, trying to get the statistical forecast to do what you want to do is probably not what you want to spend a lot of time on. We're always happy to discuss forecasting statistically, and if you said, no, I want to make sure the statistical engine takes these demands into account and deals with them, there's ways to do it, but just on my honest opinion, right now, manual overrides is where it's at. Quick, efficient, and you'll get the forecast you want. It's not the robust solution. It's not the long-term scalable solution. But right now, I think we're all just trying to get through the planning process. And you do have the ability to tell the engine, hey, for the time being, don't forecast these items right now. So if you say, well, I don't want to override everything, or right now I just want to forecast at zero because these other forecasts that come in every cycle are just giving me a lot of noise, there's ways to turn off the forecast or make sure it's not forecasted both in Demantra and Demand Management Cloud. And let me touch base on that a little bit. So when you're making your overrides, in Demantra or in Demand Management Cloud, I'll just call it ODM for short, you have the ability to make overrides at a very, very detailed level or at a fairly or even very aggregate level. Honestly, whenever possible, these days, don't go down to the product level if you can. If a specific retailer has been shuttered, don't go in at the item level and review it and tweak one item and then another. Just go to a brand at the retailer or even go to all the demands at the retailer and make your overrides there. So it's a slight revision to typically how it's best to plan, where you want to be super, super granular. But if you want here, it's about being effective, efficient. So instead of, let's say one of your retailers is still open, but demand is down. It's down to about 30% of what you typically do. Then maybe go to a product line at that retailer, make sure your view is very aggregate, and in Demantra, you use an override series. In the cloud, you can adjust a measure, and you can set it to a value or increase by a percentage, for example, or in my example, decrease by a percentage, and just very quickly and effectively modify your demands. It's not going to be perfect, but for the time being, start with what's good enough. If suddenly you see that you have enough hours in the day and you've gone through the initial process of making sure your forecasts are pretty good at the product line customer level, then by all means, go down and do more work. But for the first pass, it's really best to just look at information at an aggregate level and try to manage it. From a forecasting perspective in Demantra, there's a very simple and easy to use flag that tells the system, do a forecast do a zero forecast, or do a null forecast. And if you want to see the value, it's a level that's in the system. If you don't see it when you log into Demantra in your level list, it just means it's been disabled behind the scenes. Your IT team should be able to pretty easily enable it again. You can see it. It's called forecast user status, and it has three values. Essentially, do forecast, meaning that the system will try to generate a forecast if there's enough data. Do not forecast, and do zero forecast. And the descriptions are very self-explanatory. If for a specific product you want to see what it's at, you can use the Demantra filters, or most of you will even have a series called do forecast that's already there. Maybe IT just needs to enable it for you to access it, and that series will show you what the value is for a given product. So if you want to see what the flag is on something and then possibly toggle it, this is a very simple to use mechanism. In ODM, things are a little bit different. There isn't this flag, but there's this concept of analysis set. Analysis set could be used for lots of different things. They're typically used either for filtering out the population the engine's going to see, or for applying different profiles on different segments. But we're going to stick to the first use case. So here we're going to say, I've got an analysis set. I want to filter out part of my world. I don't want the stat engine to run on it. It could either be member-driven, like I have on the right. I could have a list of products or product lines, or retailers might be the best use case these days. So you know what, out of my 30 primary retailers, 16 have been closed for the time being. Let's just create an analysis set that does not include the ones that the retailers that have been shuttered for now. I'll just get a stat forecast for the ones that are open. Or you can be a little bit more data-driven and say, I want an analysis set that's based on demand. So I could have an analysis set that looks at, show me places where recent demand hasn't been greater than 10 units. And for those, let's just create the analysis set, or show me places where demand has been greater than 10 units. And if where it doesn't fit that criteria, don't put it in the analysis set and exclude it from generating a stat forecast. So just a couple mechanisms you could use if you want to control either Demantra or ODMC's population for who gets a stat forecast, because you want to make sure you're not getting a stat forecast for products or accounts that aren't active. Shifting demand. It's a little bit like exploding and diminishing demand, but it's more about the fact that your demand has shifted. Maybe business is doing fine. Maybe you're doing the same as before, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, but it just shifted. Maybe you're shifting from 30 retailers to 6, but in those 6, you're selling pretty much the same amount. The global demand for toothpaste hasn't gone down. It just people are buying it in different places. So this is more about reallocating your demand across accounts. So here, my first recommendation really is, we know we like planning at the customer level. We know that from a financial reporting standpoint, S&OP and all that, it makes a ton of sense to look at individual customers. But these are not typical times, and we're trying to do more with potentially less, and we've got a very dynamic and shifting environment. So I would really recommend focusing on managing your forecast at the level at which you're fulfilling demand. Meaning that if you've got 30 customers you're dealing with, but you're fulfilling their demands out of 3 orgs, manage your forecast at the org level for the time being. Just go up to the org, look at demand there, see which accounts and which products roll up to that org and say, all right, at this org, I had a forecast for, let's say, March of 800,000 units. Demand at the org came in at 600,000. I think that's going to stay put. Then let me adjust my org level forecast down from 800,000 to 600,000. Let me manage it here. Underneath, it could have been that some of the customers being serviced by this org have gone up dramatically and others have just fallen off. But at the end of the day, from a fulfillment perspective, it doesn't matter. So just try to work at the org level, balance your, look at your demands, manage your forecast here, and at least from an order comes in, we ship it out, you'll be well covered. I know the real world's more complicated. You've got service level agreements with a variety of your retailers, but these are not usual days. So if you're looking for a quick way to manage your forecast, the org level is a good way to do it. What else? In regular days, we want to do as much of the work as we can in the tools itself, whether it's ODMC or Demantra. These days, if it's more efficient for people, just punch the values out into Excel, manipulate them, adjust them, and push them back in. It is what it is. I wouldn't lose too much sleep about it. It really is about just being as effective as possible, working with the changes. The next big challenge that almost everyone is seeing is workforce reduction and resource availability. This could be a lot of different things. It could be the fact that everyone's working from home and there's a lot of external stresses as part of that. Anyone who has kids at home, or just it's stressful being at home and looking at the news all the time. There might be connectivity issues. A lot of networks aren't performing as well as we'd like them to, just because there's a lot more stress, a lot of video conferencing going on. And let's face it, sometimes it's just more effective being in an office in a collaborative environment. So we've got this stress. Two, there's a lot of other external things going on now. We have to potentially take care of sick family members. Heaven forbid someone in the workforce actually gets sick, or there's a lot of challenges. So we need to try and address them before suddenly we go, all right, we don't have enough people to do what we need to do. So step number one, really focus. Focus on what's most important and impactful to the business. This means that if a planner is supposed to scan 3,000 products every forecasting cycle, well, it's not necessarily going to happen, these forecasting cycles. Let's focus on what's important. And let's look at areas that are most impactful. If a product sells for $1, another product sells for $100, well, maybe start looking at the ones that sell for $100. Or if a product is strategic, if you need to make sure that these products, because they're life-saving or they're just your flagship product, you want to make sure that folks focus on these first. I know that's kind of a gimme, and it's, of course, that's logical. But for a lot of folks, they say, well, I'm responsible for 3,000 products. I need to scan all of them. No, the directive needs to come down and say, look, focus on what's most business impactful for us. Here's some guidelines. It's either by revenue, it's either by ABC classification, it's by accounts, which accounts are more critical to us right now, and start there. Focus on what's most impactful. To drive that, you've got a couple of mechanisms in place. So one is exceptions. Exceptions could be, you set up a business rule and you say, first show me scenarios where this exception is being met. For example, demand is more than 30% over or under what the forecast was, and the dollar value for the last month is more than $5,000. Show me these products first. Let me focus on these. Once I'm done, I can create another report with relaxed exceptions. Now show me dollar amount of $1,000 and maybe 20% up and down, etc. But first create some rules, use the exception mechanisms that are available in Demantra and in ODMC to really focus the planner's attention on what's most important. Similar to this, you can take an approach of classification and segmentation. You can say, well, I've got a lot of products, a lot of custom retailers or a lot of orgs I'm dealing with, let's classify the world. Let's classify my slow-moving products, high-moving products, and sparse products. Or let's classify my high-revenue products, my low-revenue products. Pick a classification or a segmentation method that's relevant to your business, and then pigeonhole all your products per those classifications. Why? It's just an easier way to think of the world. And if you're looking to focus your planners on what's critical, you then say, we're going to start with segment A, knock all those out, make sure those are under control. Now let's go to segment B, segment C. It's an excellent tool for focusing, folks. Next, buffer. In normal day times, we want to make sure our safety stock is low and lean and effective. And the challenge almost every organization has out there is that safety stocks are too high. There's too much inventory. There's too much obsolescence, too much expedited shipping costs between customers because the right product's not at the right place at the right time. In these days where things are a bit more chaotic, well, it's actually more chaotic actually, common thinking is increase your safety stocks, increase your buffers, especially for critical items. Yes, there'll be more of additional costs, but it's less about exactly making sure you're super efficient, that you get the most inventory turns. It's about having more on hand, that when that critical customer calls in and say, hey, I need this, you can meet that order. When a customer who's been a customer goes to the store, they're customers of yours for 20 years, and being at the store is not a lot of fun these days. It's stressful, people are wearing face masks. They go to the shelf and they see the product and the brand they've known all these years. If it's not there, the impact is just more severe than your day-to-day like stock out. So when in doubt, have higher inventories. And finally, this is a little less about demand planning, but more just about the interaction and business. Everyone, yourself, people inside your company, external people outside your company you're going to be dealing with day to day, are under a substantial amount of stress. There's a lot of factors going on, both in the workplace and outside, that are very stressful. We need to realize that something that we've done with a colleague or a counterpart for many, many years, which was relatively frictionless and seamless, suddenly might become painful, it might be tempers. So honestly, I try to do it myself, sometimes it's hard. Try to take a deep breath, be a little bit more patient with each other, cut each other a little bit more slack. I know it's very tempting to go the other way and say, look, I'm stressed, I don't have time for this, let's get this done. Why are you wasting my time? Yeah, but we're all kind of in the same situation. I think everyone feels that way. I don't think anyone's trying to waste anyone's time intentionally. We're all trying to get things done. So try to cut each other a little bit of slack. I think a little bit of effort on that front will go a long way. So some tools and things to think about. So for example, on exceptions, the Demantra Worksheet Designer has this exception filter. And essentially all you just say is, here's a series, here's a condition. So I might want to say, just show me places where final forecast is over 100 units. And for that given worksheet, at the aggregation I've chosen, it's going to show me all the combinations where at least one date has a final forecast of over 100 units. Super simple, super effective. And you know what? I've just filtered all the products that in my worksheets didn't have demand of at least 100 units. You know what? I don't care about those as much as I care about the products that do sell more than 100 units at least once per period. So great. I just filtered my world. I can focus on things that are a little bit more critical. On ODMC, there's even a more robust and sophisticated exception mechanism. You can do lots and lots of things. ODMC comes with a lot of seeded exceptions. If you're looking to set up an exception there, my recommendation, open up some of the seeded exceptions, take a look at what they've done. There's some cool things, and it'd be very easy to change some of these exceptions from looking at one measure to another measure. So the tools are there. I'd recommend you attempt to use them, or maybe even enable your larger workforce to use them by saying, look, we want you to focus on what's important. Let's talk for 30 minutes about ways to guide you to look at what's important to us as a group or as a business. Here are some exceptions we've thought about. You can take them, you can refine them, and you can just work more effectively and focus on what really matters. Also, Oracle has in the demand management cloud segmentation capabilities where you define some conditions, the process runs, and it'll actually segment your world. So on the left, you'll see a segment name, and here's a list of products at orgs. You have screens that show you the segmentation summary. Something that's brand new coming out in 20B is actually the ability to compare segments. So Oracle is definitely investing in this space. You can look at the collateral they've been generating around it. It's quite interesting, but the capability is there. For Demantra, there's no seated segmentation, but ourselves and other SIs out there have developed methodologies and code that can segment the world based on a variety of conditions. So if you need help with that, talk to your IT team or reach out to a partner that you're comfortable working with, and they can quite easily set up the segmentation based on the business rule you apply, and that will let your planners filter the world they're looking at more effectively. All right. Shifting assumptions and requirements. And this is a tricky one. Things are going to change day to day. Right now, you might get a message, hey, Macy's going to reopen May 1st. We need to make sure we're supplying them. 2 weeks from now, or even tomorrow, you might get a contradictory message. Hey, Macy's is not opening until the 15th of May. Or I'll get a message, schools are going to be shut down until the end of the year. I'll make some plans. And then, no, the summer vacation is being compressed. Schools are going to reopen June 1st, and we're going to try to get some school in. So these things are going to happen. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces, a lot of information that was right yesterday that isn't right today. It's just a norm. So what are some things to think about? First thing first is automate when possible. So if there's a process you're going through, for example, and setting the forecast to 0 for retailers that are shuttered, think if there's a way to automate this. Whether it's something that's actually truly autonomous, or it's a central team of 2 people who have been identified who are going to take care of this for the whole planning organization. It could be a lot of different things. But think about automation or pseudo-automation, essentially. Instead of everyone doing this in the decentralized fashion, let's centralize this. Here's a person. This is their role right now. They manage it for everyone else. So when we get the call, hey, this retailer is opening early, this retailer is actually not opening, we can take care of that without having too many ripples in the planning process. Other thing you should think about is simplifying processes. If you've got some sophisticated processes, for example, promotional approvals. Promotional approvals can be sometimes very complicated. We want to make sure that sales and marketing and planning and everyone's involved and kind of everyone has visibility. Well, these days, it's just about doing what the best we can with what we have. So honestly, if you could take a 6-step process and pare it down to 2 or 3 steps, it's the right thing to do. So if there's things that are taking your organization a while to do in the best of days, you say, you know what, from creating of this promotion to getting it approved takes 5 weeks. Well, I don't want to know how long it's going to take these days. So see, well, how can we streamline this? Maybe we need to just get these 2 individuals on a phone call, go through the promotions, yes, no, and just cut down the friction of the process, reduce the touch points, and just make it more effective. So look at whatever's taking people a lot of time and has a lot of touch points. Touch points would be the kind of the red flag saying, hey, maybe there's potential for streamlining, at least for the time being. It's not best practice in the long run, I understand that, but for right now, if you can streamline something, I strongly recommend you look into it. And finally, I know this is hard to do, but give yourself some slack. Give up on this whole, like, we need this to be as good as we can have it and have it be perfect. You're working from home, you're working potentially reduced hours, you've got other constraints, other stresses. Do your best, but realize that your best may not be the same best it was 2 weeks ago, a month ago. It's a little bit different. I think everyone's going to be understanding. So don't drive yourself crazy with, crap, I got this email, this retailer is shifting their strategy, or the shipment we were going to get of this product we were going to send out isn't coming in because the port is closed. There's going to be a lot of things that you can't control. So do your best, but just realize you're going to be less effective, it's going to be less efficient, and it's just a fact. And it's a fact all of us are facing, though, if that's any comfort. Some things to think about from an automation perspective. Again, if you're doing a forecast modification based on accounts, scaling down, scaling up, see if you can automate it through Access, through Excel, through some custom scripting. Demand sensing. That's something we've built over time, not for this specific purpose, but we want to detect scenarios where you had a forecast, but inbound demand isn't matching that. It's way too high or way too low. So think of ways to drive demand sensing. Some sort of alert that says, yeah, my forecast was going to be this many units, but it's actually a third of that. All right, well, this is clearly a problem. I need to look at this. I need to make sure my forecast isn't completely out of whack with what's going on in the real world. Part of what we talked about earlier around focus. Instead of looking at everything, find the places where you are most wrong, either by units or by dollars. Let's call them top contributors. Find the places you're most wrong, start looking there first, resolve those issues, and then go about your business. So either in the tools you have, working with SIs like us, talking to your IT teams and building some Tableau reports, whatever is most effective, but try to get to additional capabilities that will make the dynamic nature of the world be less impactful to your day-to-day. So we talked about, I know we're a little short on time, so I'm going to rush a little bit. We talked about the 4 challenges you're facing right now. 2 challenges you will face undoubtedly when this crisis is over is the fact that time series forecasting is going to have challenges with the fact that your demand dramatically shifted during this crisis. Is it something that's permanent? Is demand for thermometers going up 300%? Is this normal now? Or is it something that's going to end? Are we going to drop down to demand for thermometers going down to 0 because everyone bought 2 and it's just done now? So what can you do? Demantra and ODMC have capabilities, something called regime change. Usually you don't see it in time series data, but regime change is all about detecting real shifts in buying patterns. So if now people are now stocking up much more aggressively on water filters and demand has just gone up, see if the statistical engine's regime change capabilities will help you there. Try to tweak the way the forecasting models are reviewing your data. Maybe you were using 2.5 years of historical data to view demand. Well, you're going to have this fairly substantial patch of that demand, which isn't normal anymore. So maybe try to help the engine ignore that data, reduce the amount of history that the engine sees, or shift away from, let's say, seasonally driven models to models that have more of an exponential smoothing element to try to smooth that amount. Yeah, try to see if you need some sort of exception detecting demand shifts of more than X% from one cycle to the next. These are all tools that should help at least resolve some of the issues with your changing demand patterns. Tying to that is going to be the dips and the spikes you had in that historical demand and the factor impacting your forecast. If your demand for a specific account fell to 0 or had a 3x spike in March, well, the engine might decide it's seasonality, or in April, it might be an Easter effect. The engine says, Easter. When we have Easter, demand goes through the roof. It's like, no, we had other things going on. So how do you help the system manage these so your stat forecast isn't completely out of whack? One of the most common ways to do this is outlier detection. You have outlier detection in both systems. It's typically on. You might want to make it more sensitive or more aggressive, looking ahead. Another option is manually overriding history, saying, you know what, we know this was a one-time thing, hopefully. We don't want the system to even see this demand. We're going to go in and smooth it based on our own expertise and our own ideas. You can either do that manually or set up an automated process that goes in, does some extrapolation, and overrides demand with some value. Finally, they have the ability of having a causal factor. Causal factor actually tells the Demantra statistical engine, hey, something special happened here. It may or may not recur, which is what makes causal factors special. If you have a causal in the past, let's say on a spike in demand, and that spike isn't expected to recur, great. You just told the engine something special happened here. Engine will understand that this is abnormal and not repeat that spike in the future. But again, we talked about uncertainty. We talked about the fact that we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe next fall we have another flare-up, and we're going to have another quarantine for another 6 weeks. I don't know. I really don't know. Causal factor gives you the flexibility of having a mechanism in the system where you say, we had something happen in the past, we just got word that in next month it's likely to happen again. Let me turn on this causal factor. It'll tell the system that thing that happened in the past, it's happening again, or some flavor it's happening again. What you learned from the past, let's apply that into the future. So causal is a very interesting way of looking at it. Some other words of wisdom. This is less about planning, but more in general. Listen to your customers, but do remember that a lot of the feedback and reviews you're going to get are going to be anecdotal or the vocal minority. What we've seen the World Health Organization, other big organizations say is really make data-driven decisions. Look at not who's yelling the loudest, but look at people's inventory, look at order patterns, look at things if they're picking up, if they're slowing down, and if at all possible, try to incorporate point of sale data. That gives you the most, let's say, unvarnished truth about what people bought. Shipments and bookings, these days especially, might be all over the place. A retailer might place in a very big order, not because they need that many units, but because they're trying to just stockpile before someone else buys the product. So you might get a very distorted picture of what real demand is, and that retailer who bought all those units now is going to have bulging warehouses, and they're not going to order for another 4 months. So if you have any sort of consumption, whether syndicated or true POS data, to balance that with, you say, well, they bought a bunch, but they're not selling much. So I know that they're not going to order much. Or they bought a bunch, but they're selling a ton. Okay, this might be the new norm of ordering. We need to ramp up to meet this demand. Be flexible and open. I know you all have processes in place and the way you've done things for potentially many, many years. Well, we're facing an event that hasn't happened in many, many years. So be open to change. Look at what metrics and KPIs are meaningful right now. I would steer away from too much information from like, let's look at these 50 metrics. No, let's pick the 2-3 metrics that are most indicative to resolving my current business issues and see where they're leading us. And remember that stockouts or zero demands might be part of the norm now. So when you're looking at your demand data and it's capped or it's really low, is this normal? Is this being manipulated by a closure or a stockout? What's really happening behind the scenes? Keep all these things in mind. Some next steps we recommend. While you might have a long forecasting horizon, focus on, let's say, the mid to, let's say, short to mid. Whatever's outside your lead times, anything outside your lead times, I won't bother with too much just because it's not actionable. Your supply planning team can't do much about it. So look at your lead times and focus on the few months beyond that. Realize that there's a lot of stuff that's outside your control. Try to focus on what's inside your control, and if you see opportunities, seize them. So if it's potentially finding an untapped market for a product, saying, well, we typically sold it to this market and it had this use. Well, you can also use it for this in-home market. We've seen a lot of restaurants in my area, for example, that never had delivery. Well, since the restaurants are closed, now we see them popping up as delivery services. It's an opportunity, it's a necessity. You can spin it either way, any way you want, but see if there's things like that that you can do with your products. Yeah. We talked about focus, but also here, stay focused. There's going to be lots of things you can do. I talked about quite a few things you can do, but honestly, look at no more than 3 things right now that you can target and implement and use. Once those are kind of effective, or you might be open. You try 3, a week down the road, 2 are working, 1 isn't working, just abandon it. You tried, it's not working. Let's not spend another 3-4 weeks trying to get it to work. Put it aside and say, all right, those 2 things are providing some value, some benefits. What's the next things I can attack and look at to drive more benefits? And finally, get advice. Everyone's experiencing this in some way, shape, and form these days. The SIs, the manufacturers, the retailers. So reach out to us, reach out to other SIs, reach out to your retailers, and have really honest conversations about the challenges you're facing. Saying, you know what, you guys keep shifting your orders. You're driving me crazy. I can't deliver this because we've got seriously constrained supplies. So have that conversation. They'll go, oh, we're sorry. We're also reacting, but let's talk about the fact that we're going to once we place our orders, we're not going to change them for 2 weeks, knowing that you can't react. So if you are open to having that honest dialogue with the other stakeholders, I think you'll see some things that you didn't think were possible be possible. So we've got a few minutes. We've got a bunch of different companies on the line. If anyone wants to share how you guys are doing personally, business-wise, some challenges you're facing, or if you've got some questions about what I talked about today, this would be a great time to raise them. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question or tell us your story now, and you do want to touch base with us later, we're very much here to help, whether it's a 30-minute call where we just talk about some challenges, or you say, hey, I saw what you said about exceptions. Can I show my Demantra screen and you walk me through it? We're happy to do that. If you've got some more complicated or issues you want to discuss or some initiatives, by all means, reach out to us. We are very much interested in assisting and helping you in any way possible in general, but especially these days where we're all facing some unusual circumstances. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today. And yeah, reach out to our Analytical Factor email or just reach out to me directly, and I'm always happy to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.